The Knicks get doomed by dead legs, losing 139 to 126 to the Bulls. Second game of a back-to-back over the weekend, but luckily KAT's leg is not dead after he took a little bit of a tumble late in the game. We're going to talk about all of it right now on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right, welcome in to Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast. I'm Alex Wolfe. I'm editor-in-chief of Knicks site The Strickland, which you can find at thestrick.land, and he's Gavin Schall, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel, and new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed, win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Knicks part of your daily routine, whether you're checking us out on YouTube or on your favorite podcast app. We appreciate you tuning in every single day. If you haven't already, of course, make sure to hit the subscribe button, notification bell on YouTube, auto download function on your favorite podcast app so you never miss an episode, because we are here for you guys 5 days a week. And if that's not enough, your favorite podcast also has a newsletter. Introducing the Locked On Knicks Daily Newsletter. One stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com, and start your day with the all-new free Locked On Knicks newsletter. And today we will be going over the Knicks loss to the Bulls, a one where they looked pretty dead from the OKC game, especially in the third quarter. The wheels really fell off for the Knicks. The threes aren't going down. Is that because these guys are playing a little too much right now? Was it just a factor of a second game of a back-to-back, or is this a symptom of something much worse? And Karl-Anthony Towns has a 40-point effort wasted, and it gets a little hurt down the stretch of this game, but luckily apparently is okay, according to the beat reporters. So we'll talk about that in just a moment. But for now, Gavin, the Knicks 139 to 126, they lose this game. Big story here, I think 41 to 17. That is the scoring differential in the third quarter, where the Knicks only managed to put up 17. The Bulls put up 41 on them, and then 35 in the fourth quarter. So a 76-point second half for those of you keeping track at home. Not great. That's not going to result in too many wins unless you can score more than them, which the Knicks just were not able to do down the stretch of this game. They just kind of got themselves in a hole and couldn't dig back out. But this was, all in all, a pretty discouraging third quarter, and sort of felt like just a culmination of what we've been talking about recently, where Tibbs has been kind of running these dudes 40 some odd minutes a game. And I know some people are very much in the camp of the minutes are taking a toll, other people are very much out of the camp of the minutes are taking a toll. But the third quarter felt a little more than just the second game of a back-to-back where guys have dead legs. It felt a little more just more than that. I don't know. They looked so dead in that third quarter and just were not able to get anything going, to the point where then when things finally did get going in the fourth, it was kind of all over already.
Yeah, you said it. I mean, seventh game in 11 nights and crazy minutes in all of them. I said it on the show, I think with XJ, like top three. Oh no, sorry. I said it on Locked On NBA on Saturday. I'm losing track. Too many podcasts. Mikal Bridges, Josh Hart, OG Anunoby, 1, 2, and 3 in the NBA in total minutes. And lo and behold, like that has a downstream effect. Maybe I'm using the outcome, Alex, to justify my narrative, but I would argue that the dead legs has been an ongoing issue. And you see it in their defense with like OG Anunoby in particular, like a guy who the first 25 games of the season could do no wrong defensively. Like he had another bad night on that end of the floor. It wasn't terrible. It wasn't like he was getting cooked one-on-one, but off ball in transition, not getting back and giving up layups to Zach LaVine because he's jogging, just stuff you don't typically see from him. And then Mikal Bridges, who had been on a scorcher, right? I think leading the NBA in effective field goal percentage in December, and he's short on everything in the second half, a bunch of good looks. OG was also generally short on everything. Josh Hart, like not quite finishing at the rim, not quite getting the offensive rebounds he normally gets to. And Brunson and KAT were both utterly unstoppable offensively, and yet it still wasn't enough for the Knicks because, to your point, I'll attribute it to those dead legs. They get vastly outshot from distance, 8 for 30 from three, 20 for 37 from the Bulls. And if that sounds bad, it was worse in the second half after the Knicks took, what was it, a 72-63 lead at the break. In the second half, they shoot 2 for 13 from three, missed their first 8 from three while the game was still kind of competitive. Chicago goes 12 of 19. And I think that can be pretty easily attributable to, again, just not having the legs offensively and defensively, like KAT in particular, a couple different times on Vucevic and Smith, just getting lost, and someone like Kobe White getting red hot. And sometimes you're going to be the victim of that. And this is the second time this year. The Knicks played the Bulls and they said, hey, this team is pretty mediocre. We can bring our C game and we can still come out and beat them. And they couldn't do it. And that shooting has been, like, again, a trend for the New York Knicks. Out of their last 7 games, they've had one night against the Utah Jazz shooting better than 35% from three. And even that game, they were 9 for 23, which is good, not great. Like this team that was so red hot for such a long stretch earlier this year can't hit a shot. And I give Tom Thibodeau some credit. Like, at least this night, he didn't burn them even further with more minutes.
Yeah, that was actually, you must have read my mind, because that was exactly where I wanted to go next, which is, I think that this game was just sort of a culmination, but also hopefully a start of a new trend where Tibbs sort of starts trying to get this bench worked in more, because I actually thought that some of the best minutes of this game were in the second half when the bench was in. Like, they led a little bit of a charge. I mean, it was not perfect, and the Bulls were still making shots and everything. And, there was kind of just not much you could do about that in this one once they got so hot in the third quarter. But I thought Cameron Payne brought, like, some pretty good energy off the bench. And I thought that Landry Shamet, I'm still very impressed with him defensively. Like, I think that he's been really good at keeping his man in front of him and giving you, like, a version of what you get out of, the top defenders on the team, and Mikal and OG, like, enough that you can sort of squint your eyes and say, like, okay, this guy's like a good defender. Like, I think he'll be able to hold his own here. And then Precious Achiuwa, like, did pretty well, I think, with the rebounding, and, like, he got to the free throw line one time. He was finishing inside. Like, I liked a little bit of everything out of these guys. So hopefully with Deuce McBride back, we can get back to a point where, like, remember when, like, 2 years ago, or a little over 2 years ago now, the revelatory thing was switching to a 9-man rotation from a 10-man rotation. You know what I mean? And now it would feel like the opposite way. Like, if the Knicks go to a 9-man rotation, you'd be like, wow, that many players getting the hit.
I want a 6-man rotation, Alex. Give me 6.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, it felt like the way that we're going, by just the trend line, we were headed towards maybe a 6-7-man rotation by next year. But yeah, it's, I think that it would be important to start saying, okay, the full bench, for what it is right now, at least, is available once Deuce McBride gets back. Like, hopefully Tibbs can start really experimenting and being like, let's figure out how to integrate all 4 of these guys every single game. And that's Deuce McBride, Precious Achiuwa, Landry Shamet, Cameron Payne. And even if it's only, once Deuce is back, even if it's only 10 minutes for Cam Payne, 20 minutes for Deuce, 20 minutes for Precious, and, 15 minutes for Shamet, something like that. I think that's going to be super important. And then you'll start being able to see the best of these other guys on the Knicks. If they're extremely, maybe top, I don't know, 2-3 starting lineup in the entire NBA. I mean, I think it's pretty safe to say that at this point, that they're the upper crust. Like, the Knicks starting lineup they've managed to put together here is one of the best in the NBA, but you got to give them a chance to catch their breath every once in a while, because every player needs that. And, I think that we see it less in, say, a game like the game with OKC, although there was obviously the issue of where it felt like their legs kind of failed them down the stretch of that game. But, a big game, you can get up, you can be ready for it. The adrenaline is pumping. You can play 45 minutes if you have to, but it's all the games leading up to that, of playing the Washingtons of the world and the, Detroits of the world, where these guys were still playing like 45 minutes a night and then having 7 games in 11 nights. I think it just caught up to them a little bit. I think that as the second half of the season really gets going, like, in earnest here, I think that we're going to need to just see just a little bit less, like, try to keep these guys around like 35 minutes a game. Try not to run them so much on back-to-backs and stuff like that, like, as much as humanly possible. Because I don't think that it's the end all be all playing too many minutes, but I do think the guys get tired, and that's just human nature. I mean, they're top tier athletes, but I think this was just one of those games where they hit that second half. They came out a little sluggish, and their rotations weren't great in the first half to begin with, but Chicago just wasn't making shots. And then they really got burned by it in the second half and just looked more sluggish than a team typically looks on the second game of a back-to-back, I feel like. So hopefully this new trend keeps going, and these bench guys are able to keep finding a rhythm and really, find their place this year.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, the Knicks have been like maybe like I don't even say maybe they were the best team in basketball coming off a loss. Like MSG had this stat. It was only their second back-to-back second losing streak, I should say, excuse me, of the entire season, right? They were 9-1 this year after losses, which is a credit to Tibbs, credit to this team. But I also like maybe like this is me being too negative, but you can spin that stat in a bad way and say like they're not like there's just no room to lose games they shouldn't, like when the team is exhausted. And what I'm getting at there is like, this is a night I would not have cared if they sat OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges and they lose this game, because you get the same result when those guys are playing at 70%. And Josh Hart, like he probably needs a break. He's throwing himself around for 40 minutes, 16 rebounds, 10 assists, but he literally didn't make a field goal the whole night because like he is exhausted at this point. I know we're driving a really fine point home with that, but what I'm trying to get at is like you end up in the exact same place, right? Like you lose to Chicago Bulls, you do the other way and you play Landry Shamet 30 minutes and you play Campaign 30 minutes and you play Matt Ryan for 20 minutes. You're losing that way too. But you know what? Screw it. Throw Pacom Dadier out there for 25 minutes and see if he can get hot from three. Obviously, Tibbs does not know that going into the game, that those guys were just not going to shoot well. Like as OG went 5 of 12 and Mikal went 8 of 18, and combined 2 of 11 from three. But you can see the trend line with those guys, and you could say like, hey, they probably needed a night off on a back-to-back. And again, for Tibbs, the win is that they both played 33 or less minutes. Like that. I didn't look before, but I would guess for Mikal, 33 minutes, unless the Knicks just had a blowout, probably his lowest on the season. 32 for OG, pretty close to his lowest on the season. Like we're heading the right direction, but I wouldn't have minded a night off. I hope KAT, coming off this knee injury, I hope they give him a night off tonight against the Orlando Magic. We'll see. Still plenty more to get into. Karl-Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson combined for 77, which somehow barely came up in this first segment. So we will talk about that and a whole lot more next, right here on Locked On Knicks.
But first, we want to let you know about our friends over at FanDuel. And from big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. So let's take a look real quick at what the Knicks odds are. So Gavin, you mentioned that stat. The Knicks were 9-1 coming off a loss, now 9-2 coming off a loss, but that still applies going into today's game against the Orlando Magic at home. The Magic are really hurting right now. It's just the injuries keep piling up for them. I don't know for sure if Jalen Suggs is playing or not in this one. We'll have to see that closer to game time, but he's been dealing with a back issue, obviously without Franz Wagner and Paolo Banchero. Still minus 11.5 for the Knicks. I think maybe a little generous, given what the two games the Knicks are coming off of recently. But, just bet the Knicks straight up to win, I think is a pretty safe bet. Also, maybe, I don't know, maybe this will come back to bite me, but I would maybe bet the under. 209.5 is the over-under right now. Maybe bet the under, because I don't know for sure that this is going to be a high-scoring game. Certainly never seems to be with the Knicks and the Magic. So visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, Gavin, we're back in, and we're going to talk a little bit through some Karl-Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson here. So you mentioned we haven't really gone over them too much yet, but they had great games. Scoring wise, KAT especially looked really dominant in this one. I guess we're going to take a positive out of this one. He got up 7 threes in this game, which I think was something that's been sorely missed the last handful of games. Like, he has not been putting up as many threes. He took 0 in the OKC game, which was really low for him. I mean, that was just sort of like the bottom of the valley at that point, I guess, where things have been trending.
Zero is as little as you can shoot.
Exactly. It is. But things were trending down, and then he sort of hit rock bottom there with the 0 attempted threes. Back to 7 in this one, goes 3 of 7 from 3, 44 points overall, and 17 of 29 shooting overall. I mean, I don't know. I felt like this was an easy matchup for him to exploit. Nikola Vucevic isn't exactly a defender that lights the world on fire, so it was never going to be a particularly hard matchup for KAT there. But I do think that even when they didn't have Vooch on KAT, it was good that they looked to exploit the other matchups more, which was, again, something that we both harped on a little bit after the OKC game of like, why didn't they exploit this Jalen Williams matchup more? Like, it seemed like a really good matchup for him. And this one, it was just like KAT just went and ate. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. He recognized the weak matchups and took advantage of them. I thought of all the guys that looked kind of gassed in this game, like, he really didn't, at least on offense. On defense, the whole team was looking pretty sluggish, but on offense, he seemed like he had everything going. It's good to see that the knee thing, it doesn't appear to be anything serious. I wouldn't be totally surprised if we see him miss this game tonight against the Magic, just because there was a similar moment earlier this season where he sort of came up lame, and his knee was enough that he was limping around, but didn't have to get checked out of the game right away, and then eventually did check out of the game. And the next game it was just kind of like, yeah, he's going to just have a maintenance day. I think that maybe would be wise at this point, but it was good to see at least that he got his groove back before that happened, and hopefully can just rest up and come back even stronger for that game against the Raptors on Wednesday. Although if he ends up playing tonight as well, I think that he's going to go off again, because why would he not?
Yeah, the injury was described as patellar tendinopathy, which, if I remember correctly, was the exact same thing that happened earlier this season, which if you Google it, it'll tell you it's known as jumper's knee. That makes sense. It's caused by repeated stress on the patellar tendon, which connects the kneecap to the shin bone. So basically boils down to soreness. If I'm wrong on that, any MDs listening to the show, feel free to comment and correct my ignorance. But he had an incredible game before going down right at the tail end of the fourth quarter. You mentioned the 44 points, 17 of 29 from the field, 3 of 7 from 3, 7 of 10 from the line, 16 rebounds, 5 assists, and the bulk of that work done in the fourth quarter. 25 of his 44 in the fourth. And coming in, I watched the game on delay. I knew he had 44, and I just kept waiting. I'm like, all right, when does this happen? Like, it feels like he's having a pretty middling game by his standards, and then he just started cooking, and I'm like, all right, well, this is in garbage time, right? Because we didn't mention in that first segment, like, obviously Knicks were up by 9 at halftime. The defense wasn't great. The offense, particularly Jalen Brunson, who just went on a heater at the end of the second quarter, was so good that it didn't matter. And then the Bulls, just near the end of the third, in particular, just got red hot, could not miss a three. Knicks couldn't put a shot in the ocean. Kobe White 3, 10 seconds in the fourth quarter, put them up by 18. And then with 6:50 left in the game, they were able to cut it all the way down to 6. And Alex, you mentioned that bench unit looking good. It was pretty much Karl-Anthony Towns. It was, to your point, it was Shamet and Precious, at times playing good defense. And it was Campaign sprinkling in a 3 and sprinkling in a layup. But 90% of it was Towns just cooking and ripping through Nikola Vucevic he was paper mache. He was giving some back on the other end, but some of the drives were just dirty. He had this. I've seen him do this before, but this one dribble to the foul line pickup where he just looks like Giannis, right? He literally, it's like a running back getting the ball on a halfback dive and just one hand, 1-2 step from the foul line, lay it in. Plus the harm. I just thought his bully ball in this game and his post game, 2 or 3 straight post ups to start the fourth quarter, were just ridiculous. You mix in the 3, you mix in the pump and go. We've said it so many times this year, but just incredible how versatile of a scorer he is. And the combination of power, skill, and touch, it is very similar as someone who just watched Nikola Jokic go off against the Spurs. He's not obviously the passer Jokic is, but I'll say it again, those two have very similar games. They're both leading the NBA in rebounds now. It's kind of amazing that the Knicks found Jokic light, and I never I guess he has always been like that. I didn't realize how good he was. Like KAT's just an amazing offensive player.
Yeah, and speaking of amazing offensive players, Jalen Brunson, 33 points of his own,
Hmm.
went 11 of 20 from the field, only 1 of 4 from 3, but 10 of 11 from the free throw line, 8 assists for him. Uh, I thought in general, so the unfortunate part is that he ended with almost a team low in plus minus, and I do think that a lot of his minutes were kind of forgettable in a way because just being out there when that nuclear explosion happened in the third quarter and not really doing much there, that's kind of all that lives in my brain for his game for the most part. But a couple new interesting wrinkles with Brunson here in this one, and I thought this was a good way to sort of mitigate or find ways to mitigate when his floater is a little off. One of the first plays of the game ran a really simple but majorly effective give and go with Karl-Anthony Towns. And like, I don't know why they don't do this more, but it was just a very simple play. Like KAT set a screen for Brunson, and Brunson took the screen and started driving in a little bit, and then sort of, got cut off and was like, okay, I don't have an immediate path to the basket here. Kicked it to Towns, and then Towns being, like you said, one of the better passing big men in the league, Jokic light, if you want to say that, or just a full tier below, but still one of the best, because Jokic exists in his own God tier. But like, it just had a really quick thought and good eyes, and got the ball, kept his eyes open, kept his brain open to the possibility of not just shooting it or whatever. And Brunson makes an immediate cut to the hoop, which I don't think his defender was expecting, gets the ball right in the breadbasket and goes up for a nice, easy layup. I don't know why the Knicks don't go for stuff like that more. I think that getting Brunson on cuts, he's a good finisher. If he's ahead of his defender, like, you can pretty much forget about it. Like, he's either going to finish or he's going to draw a foul in some way. Like, he's really good at contorting his body. He's really comfortable on reverses. He's great at switching hands on the fly. Like, everything suggests that, like, as long as you can get his defender out of the way, Brunson is going to and give him a clear path to the hoop. Obviously, you can't have a 7-footer standing right there ready to like swat him or whatever. But if you could put him in that position with a defender behind him and an open hoop in front of him, very little is he going to end up getting, blocked or whatever. So I hope they go to that play more. I hope they even keep it more of like a high pick and roll action, because in that particular one, the give and go, that they did, Towns was actually pretty low on the block. Like, he was kind of down towards the bottom of the key there, and they still were able to pull it off, even in that limited amount of space. If they start running that more as a play that they go to at the top of the key, like, I don't see why, it's still something that for a while will keep defenders on their toes, because Brunson doesn't really do that often. So it could be a surprising thing at first, but if they establish it, then all of a sudden Brunson's 3-point range, which has been really crowded lately, I think teams are really starting to play him hyper aggressively to prevent that pull up three. Then maybe that opens things up for that a little more too. So I don't know, just one little play that stood out to me that I think could potentially be a difference maker for the Knicks going forward.
Yeah, and to me, the key on that one, and the key in doing that in general, is they got to switch there, right? So you have Nikola Vucevic, who's just not very comfortable guarding out on the perimeter, and Brunson got him on a little up fake and a step through, and then once he passed it, to your point, like Vucevic just has no chance chasing him off the ball, and if KAT has a smaller guy on him, that's just such an easy pass, right? Like, he just touched it over, and he can easily see Brunson cutting. So I'm with you. I had that down too. That was one of my favorite plays of the whole game, even though it was their first basket. But just in general, like, one of the better halves Brunson's played all season. You could maybe not just because of the stakes, but statistically, probably one of the better halves he's had as a Knick. 26 points, 5 assists, 8 of 12 from the field. And to your point, without like getting scalding from three, he at least in the first half, he did hit quite a few floaters. And I looked it up because I kept bringing it up. Like, he got off to a really slow start this year from floater range, like was consistently in his Knicks career around 53%. And this year for the first 22 games or so was like 46%. I kept thinking in my head, all right, that's due to bounce back, right? Because he's just been maybe the best in the NBA at that since he's come into the league. So now over his last 6 games, he ranks number 1 in the NBA in makes from 5 to 9 feet, making just over 4 a game. And he's doing it while shooting 64% from 5 to 9 feet. So he's just completely turned it around there and been ridiculous from that range. Had 14 points in the final 5 minutes, then the second quarter. and the Bulls just didn't have an answer to him. Maybe they just started focusing disproportionate attention on him to start the third. But I almost wish this was like a rare night where we're always asking for Brunson, hey, get off the ball, like pass it around. I would have been okay with this being a Brunson Cook night. Him scoring 50, KAT scoring 44, and maybe the Knicks winning this game 145, 136. But it wasn't meant to be, and that's because the Wings had a little bit of a down night. We'll touch on that. Maybe a few final notes on the bench before wrapping this one up as the Knicks fell to the Bulls 139 to 126. But first, I want to tell you about our friends over at Prize Picks. Basketball season is heating up, and there's no better way to get real money action while watching your favorite NBA stars than with Prize Picks. Whether you're a diehard fan or just love some friendly competition, Prize Picks makes it easy to turn your basketball knowledge into cash. Here's how it works. Pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Think LeBron's going to drop 30, or maybe Jalen Brunson's going to get more than 8 assists. Prize Picks lets you make your predictions and put your money where your mouth is in just 60 seconds. I've been using Prize Picks all season long, and let me tell you, it's addictive. Last week, I picked Jason Tatum for more than 29 points, and I picked OG Anunoby for more than 3 steals in a specific game. That's the kind of action I'm talking about. And with Prize Picks Flex Play, even if one of my picks doesn't hit, I can still double my money. Plus, when I hit, I get my money fast, sometimes in as little as 15 minutes. It's honestly the best way to keep the game exciting. And now's the perfect time to join. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 bet. That's right. No need to win to get the bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. All right. We are going to wrap this one up talking about the Wings. I thought for both, I know we've touched on it already, but for all 3 of those guys, like I give them a little bit of a break just because that Oklahoma, you always hear like players say a playoff game is like playing 2 normal games in one. That's what that Thunder game felt like. And in the playoffs, you don't have to go back to back. The Knicks had to go back to back in this one. So I give a little leeway to Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby. But I think for both those guys, again, for OG, just like disappointing defensively. And something I've noticed with him, and like we could put this on Josh Hart a little bit too, is just some of the off-ball defense, particularly on these back-to-back nights, is lacking a little bit for OG. I think it's less focus and effort, and more so the fact that he is so confident in his ability to help and then close out to the corner, probably because he's better at doing that than maybe anyone else on planet Earth. But he's sometimes so confident he overhelps off the corner and gave up 2 different threes that way. Josh Hart this year, I've said it a few times, but he's been consistently pretty poor as an off-ball defender. Got back cut in this game for another layup. Sort of dared Josh Giddey and Lonzo Ball to hit threes in the first half. They made him pay. Mikal, the main thing I noted is he had 12 points in this game with 8.5 minutes to go in the second quarter. Only scored 6 the rest of the way. And you see that with him at times where he gets off to a hot start, Alex, and just can't quite continue it through the second half. Again, you could call it dead legs. I thought some of the shot selection wasn't really there, but just never got into a rhythm after what was a really good start for Mikal Bridges.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that is, like you said, the product of what we've been talking about this whole episode, which was the dead legs, is just the defense. And
Yeah,
I thought it wasn't up to par in this one, especially that third quarter. I mean, it was just like, I, I don't know. I watched the first like couple minutes of it, and then I was just like, I don't know how much more of this I need to see, and yet I'll sit and watch the rest of it. But like, it was just you can tell when they're not locked in, and there was just no getting around to shooters. I mean, yes, Kobe White got nuclear hot, but they were unfortunately sort of allowing those opportunities throughout the first half too. It's just the shots didn't go in quite as much for Chicago in the first half, and then all of them went in the third quarter, and none of the Knicks shots went in. So it was just the defense on guys like Levine too was a little disappointing. Like I just felt like down the stretch there was a couple points where Levine like made sort of the game-winning shots, so to speak, like the ones that just were like, okay, the Bulls really need a bucket just to like stop this little mini Knicks run or whatever here. Levine came up and got those, and the Knicks just didn't really have an answer for him. But more unforgivable, to your point, is the backdoor cuts and the letting guys free for lob dunks. Like there was a Lonzo Ball one at one point, I think, where he made a back cut from the 3-point line and just nobody tagged him, and he just went right up and got a alley-oop dunk from Josh Giddey, I believe, on that play. I mean, just stuff like that is where it gets less forgivable. I'm hoping that, the early rest, the early and often rest, I guess I should say, in this one, maybe lets them kind of get their bearings under them again. Also just not being a second game of a back-to-back, getting into more of a normal schedule this week. I feel like, they're back into just the every other day schedule for this week for the most part, where it's just going to be Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Hopefully that's enough to kind of reset things here for them. But yeah, not the best game for the Wings. In the aggregate, even if you look at the box score and like at least for like Mikal shot like 45%, although 0-5 from three, like he had his moments, but to your point, just kind of faltered down the stretch. And that's disappointing. But Josh Hart, I think this was the most out of sorts he's looked.
Yeah.
In like, I mean, the outside of the fact that he got he got a double with 2 points, which is crazy.
Yeah.
The 16 rebounds, 10 assists, but scoring wise, this took me back to like preseason with him saying like, I feel lost out there. I don't know what my role is or whatever. Like, it just didn't seem like there was any designed offense for him to score the ball. And then any opportunities that he did get, he just didn't seem capable of hitting in this one. So he looked really off. But I'll touch one more time on the bench. I think they put forth a pretty good effort. I mean, a combined, let's see, 26 was 16. That's 42 minutes. And then another, 56-ish whole minutes for these guys in this one, 56, 57 minutes in total, not counting the minute and a half of garbage time each for Sims, Kolek, Toppin, and Ryan. But, I thought the bench looked pretty solid. Like, to your point, they were just sort of out there when KAT was going crazy in the fourth quarter, but the fact that's how it should be. Honestly, like that's the whole point. Like you don't the whole thing of the 9-man rotation and why it worked so well 2 years ago is that Tibbs finally abandoned the concept of the bench plays with the bench and the starters play with the starters. And that was always his greatest shortcoming that we would harp on constantly then. Now he's sort of gone in the opposite direction where he's just sort of like the starters can only play with, the starters and the bench just, can't fit with those guys. But I thought that it went a long way towards finding a way for these guys to fit together. And, maybe KAT is just the best connective tissue for the bench. And I would agree with that. Like, I think that someone like KAT, and then obviously Josh Hart got minutes with them, but I think Mikal Bridges plays well. Like if it's 3 guys from the bench and then Mikal and KAT, that's a really good lineup. Like same deal if it's OG and KAT, whatever. You can also find lineups where I think that Brunson and Precious can work well together and have worked well together in the past and just haven't really been given as much of an opportunity to work together as a 1-5 pairing this year so far. But those two work really well together. I just thought this one went a long way towards trying to fit the pieces together. And I hope that Tibbs is willing to dedicate more time to that because we saw after he gave it more than just like a couple minutes, what we see sometimes is like he'll put campaign out there for like 3 minutes or whatever, and then just be like, well, that's it. Those minutes didn't go super well. So that's enough of that. But letting them play together a little longer in this one, I think they started to really kind of find something as far as, timing on cuts and, how to feed KAT the ball, most effectively. And those guys should exist in service of making sure that whatever of the starters that are still out there with them are able to exploit being up against a bench unit, so whether that's KAT, whether that's Mikal, whether that's OG, whether that's Brunson, I think that that's really important to, have those guys be sort of setting the table for those guys and complementing them, and spacing the floor so that they can operate at their best level against a bench unit. I thought this game, even though the stats didn't really blow me away, of the guys like 8 points for campaign, 4 for Shamit. He didn't shoot particularly well, didn't make a 3, 5 points for Precious, although he made both his attempts. I thought that he had a fine offensive game. They didn't really blow you out of the water stats wise, but they don't have to because they're just out there to work in service of the starters, but also give the other starters some rest from time to time and let them cycle in and out until it's time to get them all back in for the end of the game and the end of the halves. So I thought it was really productive just in that regard in this game, how the Knicks were able to, kind of build that chemistry a little bit.
Yeah, it was something I said with XJ where you're playing the starters a lot of minutes, but you're not always maximizing the utility of those minutes. Like give Mikal Bridges the keys and let him run the bench unit. Instead of KAT like down the street. I mean, the Thunder game's not a good example because you were going to play your guys the whole way, but instead of KAT just sort of being a tertiary option and being forgotten, let him go be Shaq out there for 7 minutes with the bench. And that way you take full advantage of the talent you have while the minutes are still down. And maybe Tibbs would argue there's a case to be made that if you're playing 41 minutes, but the usage isn't high, it's not the same as 41 minutes of on-ball work, which is fair, but just an interesting way to get more out of your players, more time for your bench, more confidence for your bench. So I'm with you. Big game for the Knicks tonight. Try to avoid their first 3-game losing streak of the season. We will have post-game coverage for you here, and coverage all week. Should be a fun one for the Knicks. Another matchup against the Thunder. We get to see Emmanuel quickly on Wednesday, which I'm really excited about. So tune in. Fun week ahead on Locked On Knicks, as we remind you one final time to check out the Locked On Knicks newsletter. Again, it's a daily newsletter, the one-stop shop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. You can sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com, and start your day with the all-new free Locked On Knicks newsletter to get writing from Alex and I, our team of national writers, and of course, Josh Lloyd, give you the latest and greatest in fantasy basketball. Until next time, this has been Locked On Knicks. Peace out.